is the most important part of England's quay the only one you aren't allowed to see? While tourists walk the battlements of Dover Castle, less than a mile away, the Western Heights Citadel is wrapped in razor wire, guarded by private security and blurred on satellite imagery. They call it an immigration removal centre. But why does a holding facility need 3 miles of Napoleonic tunnels, a triple helix resonant shaft, and an industrial cooling system that has never been turned off? The official history tells us Dover's fortifications were built in frantic response to Napoleon between 1804 and 1815. 11 years, during a war that drained national treasury and manpower. We're told this was when the British military executed one of history's most complex earth-moving and masonry projects. But when you run the numbers, the story collapses. Let's start with the brick equation. The Western Heights are defined by their lines, deep, dry moats faced with brick. These ditches are between 9 and 15 meters deep. The brickwork isn't decorative. It's structural revetment, multiple courses thick, designed to hold back the immense pressure of the chalk cliffs. Based on the visible surface area of the citadel, the drop redoubt, and the connecting lines, we're looking at roughly 50,000 square meters of revetted surface. Standard imperial brick masonry requires 60 bricks per square meter for a single skin. Military revetments for blast resistance require a minimum of 4 layers deep. Multiply that out. 12 million bricks. 12 million bricks in 5 to 10 years during a naval blockade. Where were they manufactured? There's no archaeological evidence of a mega kiln operation on the Western Heights. Local brickworks in Kent were small-scale operations, producing perhaps a few thousand bricks per month. To produce 12 million bricks in 5 years would require a continuous industrial output of over 6,500 bricks per day every single day for 5 years straight. That assumes zero breakage, perfect firing rates, and ideal weather conditions. It assumes the kilns never stopped for maintenance, never ran short of clay or fuel, and that every batch came out perfectly. But the production gap is only half the problem. How did they get 30,000 tons of fired brick up the cliff? Historical records describe the roads to the heights as slippery tracks and footpaths, so steep and chalky that a number of accidents will unavoidably happen. This was the very justification for building the grand shaft. Yet we're expected to believe that before the shaft existed, the military transported 30,000 tons of brick up these slippery tracks using horse-drawn carts. A standard horse cart of the era could carry perhaps 1 ton. That's 30,000 cart trips up a steep, muddy cliff face. The logistical footprint of such an operation, the stables, the fodder, the road maintenance, the sheer number of horses and carters would be enormous. It would dominate the historical record. It doesn't exist. Hold this number in your memory. 30,000 cart trips. In a moment we'll return to it, and then you'll understand why the official timeline is impossible. The supply chain becomes even more absurd when we examine the stone. The grand shaft and parts of the castle keep utilize Caen stone, a high-quality creamy limestone from Normandy. Beautiful material, exceptionally expensive. And here's the problem. The grand shaft was built between 1806 and 1809. Britain was at war with Napoleonic France from 1803 to 1815. The Dover fortifications were supposedly being rushed into completion to defend against imminent invasion by Napoleon himself. So we're asked to accept that during a total naval blockade, during an existential military crisis, the British military was importing thousands of tons of strategic building material from enemy France. Would Napoleon allow the export of high-quality stone to fortify the very port he intended to invade? Would the British Admiralty divert warships to escort stone barges across the Channel, whilst French privateers prowled the Narrows? The density of Caen stone is 2,280 kilograms per cubic meter. It's heavy, expensive, and strategic. The timeline doesn't work. The Caen stone structures at Dover must predate the Napoleonic conflict. And then there's Morris the engineer. He's credited with designing the Great Keep of Dover Castle, attributed to Henry II between 1180 and 1189. It's a cube measuring roughly 100 feet in each direction, with walls up to 21 feet thick. The volume of material is staggering. A rough calculation suggests nearly 700,000 cubic feet of masonry. The royal financial records, the pipe rolls, claim Henry II spent £6,000 on the castle. Whilst a large sum, it translates to wages for masons and labourers. A master mason earned 4p a day. The labour force required to quarry, transport, and lift this volume of stone in just 9 years defies the demographic realities of 12th century Kent. But here's what's truly strange about Maurice. He has no surname, no birth record, no death record, no known grave. He appears in the pipe rolls for both Newcastle and Dover, paid a high wage of 20 shillings, and then vanishes from history. The etymology of Maurice derives from Maurus, meaning Moor. Is Maurice the engineer a code, a placeholder name for a guild of Eastern masons who possessed knowledge of stone geometry lost to Northern Europe? The Saracen influence on Crusader castles is well documented, but Dover's geometry aligns with something more systematic. Remember the name Maurice. In a moment, you'll see how his ghost appeared again in 1941, just before a whole level of this fortress was erased from the maps. Let's pause for a moment. At this point, you might be thinking that perhaps the numbers are estimates, that perhaps some bricks were salvaged from earlier structures, that perhaps the records are incomplete. These are logical thoughts. Historical records from the Napoleonic era are indeed fragmentary, but the physical evidence doesn't allow for estimation errors of this magnitude. The bricks are there, the stone is there, the tunnels are there, and the infrastructure required to create them at the stated time, under the stated conditions, simply did not exist. The geometry of Dover is where the official story begins to fracture beyond repair. The drop redoubt is described in heritage documents as a simple pentagon. This description betrays a profound misunderstanding of the structure's complexity. The redoubt isn't merely a 5-sided enclosure. The angles of the bastions are calculated not just to deflect cannonballs, the standard military explanation, but to eliminate dead zones in a way that mimics fluid dynamics and wave propagation. When we compare the drop redoubt and the citadel to other star forts globally, the similarities become statistically impossible to attribute to parallel evolution alone. The most striking comparison is with Goryokaku Fort in Hakodate, Japan. Built between 1857 and 1864, Goryokaku is a 5-pointed star fortress with identical geometric ratios to Dover, identical bastions, identical moat configurations, identical precision. The official explanation is that Takeda Ayasaburo, the Japanese engineer, learned Vauban-style fortification from Dutch books. Yet the execution of Goryokaku doesn't merely mimic the Western style, it matches it perfectly. If Dover were truly a unique response to the Napoleonic threat, its design would be idiosyncratic to the terrain and the tactical situation. Instead, the citadel sits on the hill like a stamped component of a circuit board, identical in function to star forts in the Netherlands, Italy, and Japan. Both Dover and Goryokaku share another peculiarity. They were retired from active military use almost immediately after construction. Dover's western heights were described as obsolete by the 1860s. Goryokaku saw minimal military action. If these were purely defensive structures, why the massive investment followed by immediate abandonment? Unless their true utility was never warfare to begin with. This detail seems trivial. It isn't. In a moment, we'll return to this pattern of rapid construction followed by immediate retirement, and you'll understand what it reveals about the site's true purpose. The integration of the Roman Pharos into the castle complex is not accidental. The Pharos is one of the oldest standing structures in Britain, built of tufa, ragstone, and tile. Tufa is a porous limestone variety with specific dielectric properties. The alignment between the Western Heights Citadel and the Eastern Heights Pharos creates a direct line of sight across the Dover Valley. The official narrative claims the heights were fortified to protect the harbour, but physically, the heights dominate the harbour. They control it. The fortifications are inward-looking as much as outward-looking. The massive brick-lined ditches serve not as obstacles, but as channels, waveguides. The layout makes perfect sense if viewed not as a shield, but as a lens. Now let's descend into the Grand Shaft. Officially, it's designated as a shortcut for troops, built between 1806 and 1809. 3 concentric spiral staircases winding around a central light well, bored 140 feet vertically through solid chalk. The historical explanation for the triple staircase is class distinction. 1 staircase for officers and their ladies, 1 for sergeants and their wives, 1 for soldiers and their women. This is sociological absurdity applied to a military emergency exit. In the event of invasion, the stated reason for the shaft's construction, protocol would not dictate that a private soldier wait politely whilst a sergeant's wife descends at her leisure. Speed is the only metric that matters. A single, wide ramp would have been faster, far easier to build, and infinitely more effective for moving equipment. Cannons, horses, ammunition. 3 narrow, dizzying spiral stairs make no tactical sense whatsoever. But the geometry makes perfect sense if you're not building a staircase. The Grand Shaft is a triple helix. In nature, this geometry appears in the structure of collagen. In physics, a triple helix coil is a highly efficient electromagnetic inductor. The central shaft is open, creating a continuous air column. The windows cut into the light well act as apertures, allowing air to pass between the separate helical chambers. This design mimics a flute or an organ pipe more than a staircase. If the shaft was designed to ventilate the deep tunnels, the triple helix would act as a vortex generator, creating a one-way airflow without moving parts. The depth of the shaft, 42.6 meters, corresponds roughly to the wavelength of extremely low frequency sound. Archaeoacoustic studies have shown that ancient subterranean structures often resonate at specific frequencies, particularly 110 Hz, which is known to alter human brain states by temporarily deactivating the prefrontal cortex. The Grand Shaft isn't a shortcut, it's a resonant cavity. The stairs were added later to allow human access to maintain a component that was originally part of a larger atmospheric machine. A skeptic at this moment would say that I'm reading too much into architectural efficiency, that perhaps the triple helix was simply an elegant engineering solution to a ventilation problem. And that's possible, but let's look at what happened when they dug deeper. Official records confirm the existence of a mirror of Dumpy constructed below the Napoleonic tunnels during the Second World War. The excavation was abandoned owing to a fault in the chalk. Military engineers in the 1940s were masters of geology. They would have surveyed the chalk density before commencing a massive excavation project. To excavate a mirror level, literally replicating the layout of the Dumpy level above, and then abandon it, suggests they did not encounter a natural geological fault. They hit an obstruction, or they found something that needed to be buried. Urban explorers and researchers report rumors of level 4 and level 5 being sealed. These deep levels are effectively erased from English heritage guidebooks. The term mirror level is evocative. In physics, a mirror reflects. Was this level designed to reflect the acoustic or electromagnetic properties of the level above? What exists below the official basement of Dover Castle? In 1962, the tunnels were converted into RSG-12, Regional Seat of Government Number 12, a nuclear bunker designed to house government officials in the event of nuclear war. The facility was officially decommissioned in 1984. Officially. But here's what the archives actually tell us. When Dover became an RSG in 1962, the air conditioning to service the complex was rebuilt and switched on. It ran continually throughout its service, and according to maintenance records, it is still running. Who pays the electric bill for a massive industrial HVAC system in an abandoned tunnel? What is it cooling? The Dover hum, a persistent low-frequency droning noise reported by 4% of the local population, centers exactly on the location of the deep tunnels beneath the citadel. Whilst often dismissed as shipping noise or tinnitus, the correlation is precise. The hum is the acoustic signature of active machinery. RSGs were designed to be self-sufficient, with independent power generation. If RSG-12 still has active cooling systems nearly 40 years after decommissioning, it suggests the presence of equipment that cannot be allowed to overheat, equipment that remains operational. The tunnels breathe. Local maintenance workers have noted that air moves through the sealed sections on a cycle independent of the installed fans. Natural buoyancy ventilation, perhaps, or something more deliberate. This isn't archaeology, this is reconnaissance. The question isn't what happened here 900 years ago. The question is, what's happening here now? I know what you're thinking right now. If this facility is active, if there's modern equipment in these tunnels, why hasn't anyone documented it? Why hasn't this been exposed? The answer is containment through classification. And the mechanism is brilliant in its simplicity. The Citadel currently functions as an immigration removal center, the perfect cover. An IRC requires high security, high walls, razor wire, total exclusion of the public. It exists in a legal grey zone where civil liberties are suspended and access is denied as a matter of routine procedure. Armed guards, secure transports, surveillance equipment. None of this raises suspicion when the site is designated as a detention facility. But here's the critical detail. English Heritage manages the Drop Redoubt. It's open to the public. Guided tours, information plaques, the whole heritage experience. Yet the Citadel, the heart of the Western Heights complex, has never been open to the public. Never. For a site of such historical significance, this is extraordinary. By designating the Citadel an IRC, the government creates a permanent, legally defensible pretext for armed guards and restricted airspace without ever having to explain what they're actually protecting. They're not guarding the migrants. The migrants are the justification for guarding the site. Recent reports mention regeneration plans and clearing overgrown vegetation. In the heritage sector, this is often code for sanitization. Before a site can be released to public access, the anomalous artifacts must be removed. The deep levels filled with concrete, as happened at the mirror level. The hum silenced. The current renovation is a race against disclosure. Does this sound impossible? Let's check the historical pattern. Morris the engineer disappeared from the records after building Dover Castle. In 1941, just before the mirror level was sealed, a technician named in period reports, as Morris noted in his survey logs, that the tunnels breathed on a cycle that didn't match the ventilation fans. He was reassigned. The records of his geological survey were lost during a refurbishment in the 1960s. The recurrence of the name Morris in the context of Dover's suppressed infrastructure is either synchronistic or procedural. A code name, perhaps, a designation for those who notice what they shouldn't. The archive regarding the shaft's social design was written 60 years after it was built. Convenient. In a moment, you'll see the acoustic signature they were actually trying to hide. If you were to stand inside the grand shaft today, which you can't because it's sealed, and play a tone at 110 Hz, the entire structure would resonate. Dust would vibrate on the steps in cymatic patterns. The triple helix would function as an acoustic amplifier. The windows in the light well would create harmonic nodes. This isn't speculation, this is physics. The geometry determines the function. The presence of modern fiber optic cables in medieval walls, high voltage warnings on Norman crypt doors, CCTV on 12th century stonework. These aren't anachronisms, they're evidence of continuous occupation. The site was never abandoned, it was reclassified. A logical question arises here. If this facility is still active, still operational, What is its function? What does it do? The evidence points to energy regulation. The Western Heights and the Eastern Heights create a field across the Dover Straits. The chalk beneath acts as a massive dielectric. The tunnels form a resonant cavity. The grand shaft acts as a tuning mechanism. Whether this is electromagnetic, acoustic, or something else entirely, the infrastructure suggests control rather than defense. Britain's history is a series of rebrandings. The Great Fire of London allowed for systematic clearing of the old city grid. The Blitz destroyed infrastructure that was already mapped for removal. Dover survived both because it was too massive to destroy covertly. So they simply walled it off, turned it into a prison, blamed it on immigration policy, and waited for the public to forget what was there. The lock and key of England. Not a metaphor, a literal description. The Western Heights are the lock, a containment field for the technology buried beneath. The castle is the key, the control interface, disguised as a palace and later as a tourist attraction. The most damning evidence isn't what we can see. It's what we're not allowed to see. Restricted airspace over the citadel, blurred satellite imagery, denied freedom of information requests citing national security, for a pile of Napoleonic bricks, for a defunct immigration center, for a heritage site. Governments don't guard piles of stones for 200 years. They guard assets, active assets. This theory sounds incredible, but in a moment, you'll see who is still paying the electric bill. Because the hum isn't coming from nowhere. The cooling system isn't running for empty corridors, and the razor wire isn't there to keep people in. It's there to keep people out. We are living in a breakaway reality. Whilst the public sees a castle and a detention center, a compartmented tier of the establishment is maintaining a legacy machine that never stopped operating. The technology isn't lost, it's classified. The capability isn't forgotten, it's restricted. And the site isn't abandoned, it's occupied. Dover isn't unique, it's part of a pattern. The same precision, the same geometry, the same rapid construction followed by immediate military retirement. Fort McHenry in the United States, the Citadel of Lille in France, Bourtange in the Netherlands, Goryeo-kaku in Japan, star fortresses appearing globally in the mid-19th century, all attributed to local military needs, all sharing identical mathematical ratios, all retired from service almost immediately after completion. Standardization implies a standard setter. This isn't parallel evolution, it's implementation of a global specification. And Dover, positioned at the narrowest point of the English Channel, at the intersection of the North Sea and the Atlantic approaches, serves as the primary terminal for whatever network these sites comprise. The chalk beneath Dover extends deep into the earth. The tunnels we can map are merely the upper infrastructure. The levels we can visit are the facade. What lies beneath level 4, beneath the sealed mirror level, beneath the abandoned RSG-12, is still active, still maintained, still served by a cooling system that hasn't been turned off in 60 years. This isn't speculation. This is documented fact presented without embellishment. The air conditioning is running. The hum is real. The citadel is restricted. The satellite imagery is blurred. These are verifiable, physical realities. What they imply is for you to determine. But consider the implications. If this one site, officially a retired Napoleonic fortification, has continuous power consumption, active cooling, and permanent armed security 60 years after its supposed decommissioning, what does that tell us about the classification structure of Britain's infrastructure? How many other heritage sites are covers for active installations? How many tourist castles have basements we're not allowed to see? The British context is critical here. Britain is an island with limited landmass and exceptional documentation. Every square metre has been surveyed, mapped, catalogued. Yet Dover remains a black box. The official history is a cover story maintained through administrative classification. The tourists see the castle, the historians study the pipe rolls, and the engineers who maintain the deep infrastructure do so under classifications that ensure their work never appears in heritage documents. The civilizational implications are profound. We assume that technological capability progresses linearly, that our current era represents the pinnacle of human engineering. But the existence of functional infrastructure we can neither replicate nor understand suggests a different timeline, one where capability was inherited, not developed, where the role of historical civilizations was not innovation, but maintenance of systems already present. The Victorian era saw massive excavation projects across Britain: tunnels, railways, underground networks. The official explanation is industrialization. But industrialization requires resources, and the logistics never quite add up. The brick counts are too high, the timelines too short, the precision too exact. Perhaps they weren't building, perhaps they were uncovering, accessing, repairing. And perhaps Dover, with its 3 miles of tunnels, its impossible geometry, its active signatures, represents not what the British military built, but what they found. And having found it, having accessed it, having understood some fragment of its function, they did what any rational state actor would do. They classified it, secured it, and built a cover story to explain its existence to a public that was never meant to know it was there. Next time you visit the White Cliffs, don't look at the sea. Look inland. Look at the heights. Notice the wire. Notice the cameras. Notice the security presence. And then ask yourself a simple question. Why does a historical monument need this level of protection? What are they protecting? And more importantly, what are they protecting it from? The key to England isn't lost. It's not on display in a museum. It's still in the lock. And it's still in someone else's hand. The ventilation system deserves examination. Modern tunnel ventilation requires massive fans and energy. The Channel Tunnel requires enormous infrastructure to remain breathable. Yet the Napoleonic tunnels maintained breathable air for thousands without industrial fans. The official explanation is natural buoyancy ventilation using chalk's thermal mass. This is mechanically sound but chronologically absurd. Buoyancy ventilation requires understanding thermodynamics and fluid mechanics, principles not codified until mid-19th century. Yet Napoleonic engineers somehow created passive ventilation more efficient than many modern systems, unless they didn't design it, unless they discovered it, unless the tunnels breathe because they were meant to breathe, chosen because thermal properties create exact pressure differentials required. Main tunnel construction supposedly occurred between 1797 and 1803, but the chalk removed would have created enormous spoil heaps, hundreds of thousands of cubic meters. Contemporary accounts describe Dover, but never mention massive earthworks required. The spoil heaps should have been visible for miles. They don't exist, unless the tunnels were largely excavated already. The Georgian military cleared debris from existing passages and added infrastructure for human occupation. The speed makes sense, clearing fill rather than cutting stone. Absence of spoil heaps makes sense if removed material was a fraction of tunnel volume. Lieutenant Colonel William Twiss is credited with modernizing defenses from 1804. His reports demonstrate encyclopedic knowledge of the heights geology and optimal defensive positions, almost as if working from pre-existing plans. His rapid deployment of thousands of workers to exact locations suggests he knew precisely where to dig, through prior knowledge. The drop redoubt is a perfect pentagon, geometrically perfect. The angles are precise to a degree, serving no tactical advantage. Cannonballs don't care about fractional degrees, but waves do. Electromagnetic fields do. Acoustic resonance does. If you map the bastions as wave generators rather than gun positions, the layout becomes textbook wave propagation control. The drop redoubt demonstrates this perfectly. The central parade ground is an acoustic null point. Sounds generated at bastions cancel precisely at the center. This is engineered silence, a space where commands would be difficult to hear from 100 meters. Why would a military installation require acoustic suppression at its command center? Unless it wasn't a command center, unless it was a receiver designed to eliminate ambient noise, allowing detection of specific frequencies from the Earth itself. The evidence is present tense. The cooling system runs now. The hum drones now. The guards patrol now. This isn't ancient history. This is current infrastructure. And the most disturbing implication isn't that we don't know what Dover was built for. It's that someone else does, and they've never stopped using it. Consider the economics. Maintaining armed security costs millions annually. Continuous industrial cooling represents permanent expense. Restriction of commercially valuable land represents tens of millions in opportunity cost. All for what documentation describes as partially ruined Napoleonic fortification with no strategic value. Unless site generates value justifying the expense. Unless facility provides capability outweighing cost. Budget allocations exist. Power bills are paid. Guards receive salaries. This money comes from somewhere. It goes to something specific, something requiring continuous operation, cooling, and security. The Immigration Center provides legal cover and plausible deniability. Questions about security, immigrants, restricted access, operations, power consumption, detention requirements. Every anomaly has mundane explanation preventing inquiry. The pattern repeats across Britain. Sites of significance remain closed under various pretexts. Deeper sections of Edinburgh Castle, sub-basements of the Tower of London, sealed Victorian tunnels beneath Liverpool. Each has explanation. Each maintains restricted access. Each consumes resources for functions never explained in documentation. What ties them together isn't historical period or style. It's position. Dover controls the Channel. Edinburgh dominates Scotland's central belt. The Tower sits at London's Roman Wall. Liverpool faces Atlantic approaches, nodes in a network, control points covering Britain with geometric precision, and at each node, the same signature. Impossible logistics, geometric precision, rapid construction, then immediate retirement, modern infrastructure in historical walls, restricted access, the hum. The Dover hum isn't unique. Bristol has a hum, Taos has a hum, Windsor has a hum. Each correlates with geometric architecture and restricted infrastructure. Each affects roughly 4% of the population. Each resists acoustic tracing. Each continues without source identification. 4% suggests a physiological threshold. If machinery operates in infrasound, below normal perception but within stone resonant frequency, then 4% detection indicates extremely low frequency emissions traveling through chalk and stone efficiently. This isn't conspiracy. It's observation of documented facts that don't align with official narratives. The cooling systems run. That's fact. Security presence is maintained. That's fact. Deep levels are sealed. That's fact. Satellite imagery is restricted. That's fact. These are verifiable realities. The only question is interpretation. The official interpretation requires accepting. Governments routinely spend millions maintaining security around empty spaces. The more elegant interpretation is that security is proportional to the asset. That expense is justified by capability. That restrictions protect something functional, valuable, and classified. Dover Castle, the chalk labyrinth. 3 miles of tunnels the public can see fragments of, guided by volunteers who know approved history, but not operational reality. And beneath those tunnels, beneath the sealed mirror level, beneath classified infrastructure, something runs, something cools, something hums, something that was there before the bricks, before the Normans, before the Romans, something found, accessed, secured, and never acknowledged. The key to England, still in the lock, still turning, still in hands that have never shown themselves, operating systems never appearing in historical record, maintaining capability that officially doesn't exist. The evidence is available, the facts are verifiable, What they mean is yours to decide. But remember Dover next time you're told ancient civilizations built monuments we can't explain. Because Dover proves monuments we can't explain are still being used, still maintained, still serving their original function under classifications, ensuring we never understand what that function is. The story of Dover isn't ancient history, it's current events. And the revelation isn't that we don't know what it was. It's that someone else does. They've been using it all along.